in India. On behalf of Nivaaran, I warmly welcome today guest and keynote speaker and all participants from India and across borders for this 19th lecture in series of lectures hosted by Nivaaran. I, Prachi Bajpai, mediator and advocate on record in Supreme Court of India, along with my colleague Anupama, Ahluwalia, mediator and trainer, as well as attorney at New York and India, are privileged to be part of this 19th lecture hosted by Nivaaran. Nivaaran is an organization managed by a group of mediators in Supreme Court of India. Nivaaran is working and advancing its efforts for amicable settlement of disputes of parties through popular tool of ADR mediation. It has more than 100 trained mediators. Nivaaran has played a vital role in resolving disputes during difficult phase of COVID-19 and afterward. Nivaaran has trained many enthusiastic lawyers through its training sessions and given efficient mediators to society. Nivaaran, with support of Youth Bar Association of India and Commonwealth Association of India, organized many training sessions and lectures. With immense pleasure, I say that all these lectures and sessions have been appreciated worldwide. Its purpose is to share and gain knowledge with experts of the field. Ms. Helen Lightstone, who is our guest and keynote speaker, is the founder of Lightstone Academy for Conflict Resolution, is a mediator, trainer, licensed paralegal, and college professor. Helen is both chartered mediator as well as qualified arbitrator. She has mediated two-party and multi-party disputes in various contexts. Helen is also respected and experienced professor of alternative dispute resolution. She has taught ADR for the Department of National Defense and to police officers in Belize, and coaches at Osgood Hall Law School in the Masters of Law, Dispute Resolution and Negotiation Program. Today's topic of lecture is photography and conflict resolution. What do they have common in? Personally, at a glance, what I have found few things common in photography and conflict resolution. I want to share in two words. The first thing which I find it common in both the things is making a person comfortable and building a trust between a photographer and a person being photographed. Second, mapping a conflict on surface level and the current flowing under the surface. The third, which I have found, is using different tools on right time to capture correct image of conflict before proceeding to resolve dispute for getting desired results. Now, before inviting our guest to start, I request all participants to please share your questions on chat box. We will be taking up in the question answer session, which will last for 20 minutes. Now I request my august guest to start and enlighten us on the topic.
Wow. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And I think you got that completely correct with your observations, making your disputants comfortable, mapping the process, and then capturing the dispute itself. And so I thank you for doing that. Okay, so we'll start with our first page. But here we go. And please excuse my enunciation. Nivaaran ki saman nit sarasayan. Age muje is sundar ke rekram ki maze beni karnike avasar dene lai dani evade. Maybe apse sikne kale a atsukun. Respected members of Nivaaran, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present at this lovely event. I'm looking forward to learning from you as well, and I really appreciate the time change that you're willing to stay with me for well into the evening. So, photography and conflict resolution, what do they have in common? And I think that Prachi pretty well did my job for me. So thank you again for that. Okay, so the goal of this online dialogue is to inspire your practice by thinking creatively and outside the box. Learn how to frame that conflict differently by exploring your creative side. Now, as an instructor in the college system and with my own classes, I encourage you, if you would like to put your questions in the chat, that's great. So feel free. And I'm happy to answer anything that you have, any questions that you have. Okay, the two subjects we'll be talking about today, and two subjects you'll typically capture are landscape and people. So unless I tell you otherwise, all the photographs are Helen Lightstone's. And I'm also happy to explain where I was if you have any questions about that. So when you're taking photographs, there are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind. You want to keep in mind the composition. So what is making up your image? And then what's the lighting? And what's the cropping? So how do you like zone in on a specific area of a photograph to help you? So we'll look at composition first in landscapes. And again, composition is where you place your subject in that frame, in the frame of your camera. And this also is a presentation that's suitable to anybody that has a digital camera, or if you're zipping around using your cell phone, the cell phone cameras are also great. So these are also great tips for both. So we're going to look at landscape first. Now, we're first going to talk about the horizon line. And the horizon is where the sky meets the earth, basically. And here we have a moody image with a fishing boat in the lower third of this photograph. This was taken in Prince Edward Island, which is the eastern part of Canada. So we're just beginning to see a story here. And this picture has some information. We know there's a couple of people. We know they're on a journey somewhere. We can see some dark clouds, some sunshine rolling in. And also, if you look very closely in the background, you might be able to see some waves. Okay, thank you very much. So this isn't unlike a mediator's brief, a mediation brief, or if you're in, that would be in a legal setting, of course, where you get a background of the story. You really don't know too much. And sometimes in, let's say, a community setting, when you're dealing with two neighbors or a community issue that's going on, the mediators might receive a document, a statement of issues that just gives you a very general background. This is not unlike that very general background. But when you change your horizon line, you can change the drama, change the image, and it gives you visual interest to your photos. It's going to shift the way you look at something. It's also like conflict. Look at that conflict from a different angle. Take the focus off one area by moving it to somewhere else. Now, of course, an image of a bridge and a walkway is typically a very positive image. It sort of reflects hope, you know, and encouragement and a new way forward. Okay, now, so we'll have a look at horizontal images. And I like to think of horizontal images taken with a wide angle lens gives you a very basic story. So it's wide, It's general, but does not zone in on the details of the dispute. So for example, this one might say, I was traveling in Italy, excuse me, but the details of where I was and who I was with is missing. This could be similar to an introductory question in a mediation, such as this very simple introductory question, what brings you here today to mediation? And in that instance, when somebody answers, what brings you here? Well, I have a problem with my neighbor. It's very wide. It does not give you much detail at all. But it's also the beginning of finding out the party's position. It's just that tap at the door. Why are they in this conflict to begin with? Okay. Next image. And it's again, when you would use horizontal versus vertical images. It's when you want to show space, and so that person can tell the story. So again, I'm traveling. It's a grayish blue sky. It looks windy, but there are no other details for this. For example, who am I with and what am I doing? What were the other people doing that I was traveling with, and what's the relationship between us? There is a lot of content missing in this wide angle landscape, but it's a great overview of a setting. And again, it could be viewed as learning about someone's position in a conflict. The storm could be more revealing and foretelling than we think. So we're just still getting that underlying image. But now we've got a general overview of a conflict taken with a wide angle lens. So, but now we want to sort of find out more what's going on, and we have to start looking closer at the conflict. So even though we're looking closer, the background's still very appealing, but we still need to know more about what's going on. It's time to start looking at the details of the image. So when we look closer, we can see, and I think this is an aloe vera plant. We start looking closer, of course, the background's beautiful. It was a lovely sunny day. There were flowers somewhere off to my right. But when we start looking at the leaves of this image, you're going to see people's names carved into the leaves of the aloe vera plant. So now we're getting a little bit, a stronger image of what's going on. And I think there's names on almost every leaf. I think there's also a destination on one of them. So now we're seeing a fuller picture of basically what's going on. Okay, next image. So we're going to now start looking at horizontal images when you want to show space and it tells a basic story. So verticals, when you want to show an upward direction and the scene is taller than it is wider. Images like this and the following could be related to viewing a conflict with structural challenges. For example, when there's a hierarchical issue or a challenge, or family, a workplace issue, and you've got that definite hierarchy, family status, political status, and sometimes it's good to map things out on something that could be going straight up. And from when you start seeing the structure, then you might be able to see, okay, what's going on within the structural conflict? Is there, let's say it's a workplace dispute, are there issues of, in North America, this is fairly common, I don't like my boss. So it happens. I don't like my boss. And then therefore you might have some relationship challenges. You then might find within looking at the structure that there are now value challenges. And there's challenges that might be related to somebody who just took on the workload of somebody else because they were let go. Now we have data challenges. So that vertical image can be used to map out where conflict is within it. Plus, you can also use it as a graph. Somebody is stressed at this location, with data, somebody else has a values conflict. You can map it out all through a vertical image. So I find that was actually taken in a location. I don't know if anybody's seen this, where, there's usually fences with locks, and couples put their locks on the fence to sort of show their undying affection for each other, because it's locked there permanently. So again, vertical, when you want to show that upward direction, such as hierarchy, structure, data, and the scene is taller than it is wider. Okay, but now we want to move in closer. So this is when you want to know more detail about what's going on, it is time to zone in and figure out what's happening. You might do this in mediations with questions like, tell me more about whatever. What happened when? What was the impact on you? What do you think the impact was on the other person, etc.? And when you say you're stressed, what does that mean to you? So you're getting a closer look. It's finding those underlying interests to what's going on. So I once heard this saying, it's perfect. A position is what you want. So you're looking at two disputants, they take a position, but as we know as mediators, there's always something underlying those positions, and it's an underlying interest, a want, need, fear, desire, or a concern, or a combination of those that have not been met. So by zooming in a little bit closer, you start learning what is going on with that person or the parties to the dispute. Because it is not until you figure out what everybody's underlying interest is, can a resolution start surfacing. You can't, as we know, you cannot resolve things or have the parties resolve things until we actually know what the problem is. So that sort of demonstrates, but now we want to get closer still. So as we are still trying to identify those underlying interests of what the position is. Okay, this is where you start uncovering what the underlying issues are. Is there anything keeping your disputants from being what I like to say frozen in time? Are they using what I would call frozen words? You always, you never, you always do this, you never do that. You're continually, what have you, fill in the blank. It's our task to move those frozen words by letting the temperature in the room warm up. So Anupama has spent time in New York. From what I understand, she would understand the ice that we have in winter. So this is actually taken during an ice storm that we had in Ontario a number of years ago. And for me, the first thing I did was I ran out and took my camera and photographed the neighborhood. So, and these lovely plants were literally frozen and sort of there for all time with this mound of ice on them. They were rock hard. So it is like a disputant being fixed in their position. They can't move because they're so stuck. And it leads me to this photograph, which is one of my personal favorites. Are they anchored to a position for what I call, or what you may know as historic reasons? I can't possibly settle. I've spent so much money on this, I can't possibly come to a resolution. I'm so attached to the money of it. And also people are attached to conflict because they love the drama. Drama lets you connect with other people, share with other people. And all of a sudden you have a team that are supporting you. And as I talk about in my conflict resolution classes, you are always going to talk to somebody who will always support you. You're not going to the other side, as I like to say. You are very careful in who you choose to support you. So the question that a mediator might ask is that thinking in the future that says, what happens if we resolve this conflict today? Can we shift them from seeing what will happen if they stay stuck in the past? And I'm sure in legal settings, we've all heard that saying, I don't care how much this costs, it's the principle of the thing. And as one of my very good friends says, there has been a lot of money spent on the principle of the thing, whatever that thing is. And so then what happens to the disputant if they actually resolve it? What happens to the drama? Because people get addicted to those pieces. And we have to ask them, who are they? Who is that person after that conflict is resolved and the drama is now over? Who are they? So the anchoring, it's all about anchoring historically in money or drama and a number of other things that I always find so fascinating about people in dispute. So as you get closer, more details show up. So for example, when I took this photo, I was walking around a lovely old estate also in Prince Edward Island in Canada. And, it was sort of very representative of Europe in the 1800s. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to focus on taking a picture of that piano or that lovely painting. I'm going to look at the unusual, the door hinges, the window lifts, and everything that I think went unnoticed, including the incredible ceramic tile floors, just to change my view on what was going on. So I started to see other elements that made up the whole. And these elements, I think this was a door hinge, are typically almost entirely overlooked, but it's beautiful. So I photographed it. Okay. And don't forget the small details. They're very, very important. So this is clearly a picture of a tulip. I was at ground level and sort of on my tummy looking at this lovely tulip with all the taller tulips above it. And I thought, no, this little tulip with the sun shining on it has a lot to say. So I always say, don't forget to focus on the smaller things. Okay, so does this piece of information belong to a bigger picture? And I'm going to say, yes, it does. It's part of a pattern of raindrops on a window. And though it's a small image, it's actually part of a much larger picture. And that picture is next. So I happen to just love that photograph. So that's the picture that it came from. Both of these images are raindrops on a window pane. It's a smaller part of a much bigger picture still. Each drop has its own unique perspectives that need to be addressed. So the previous image is a close-up of that bottom droplet. Both of the images are taken from a window 15 stories up, looking at traffic lights coming from a major intersection in Toronto. I love this photograph. I think it's great fun. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about pattern and why pattern is important in a mediation process. So patterns are comments. I'll rephrase that. Patterns are like comments that keep being repeated. If you don't address the comments, you're missing out on valuable information. And a party to a dispute will keep raising the comments until they are addressed by you, the mediator. So they are important. They are not meant to be missed. And I think that in the mediations that I have done, a disputant will keep bringing something up, even if they don't know they're doing it. They'll keep bringing it up until it's addressed by you. So of course, as you know, it is important for us to listen to those patterns of conversation. We can see several stories going on here, the flower itself, the bee, and how they are interconnected. And we need to figure that out as mediators. How is everything interconnected? So we're still on composition, but now we're moving to people. So hopefully there'll be a couple of good pointers in here as well. And again, composition is where you place your subject matter in the frame. So we're looking at individuals or pairs and groups. So we're going to talk about zoning in and use what's around you. It does relate back to what Prachi had said earlier about making your parties comfortable. So in this image, I had the groom lean against the tree to provide visual interest to the picture and also to support him so he can relax when standing and get into a pose that he's comfortable with. The takeaway from this actually as a photographer is you too can lean against something if you're taking a photograph. Sometimes it's a building or a tree. It could also be a person. Hey, can I just borrow you for a second? Let me focus. Because sometimes you need that stability so you're not shaking as you're taking the photograph. In this image, the groom is physically supported by the tree. It's an important analogy when mediating. What do your disputants need from you as a mediator to feel supported? So on a lighter note, and maybe not so light, there is always food and beverages available to the disputants at any point so they feel comfortable. Some mediators have a very specific seating arrangement when mediating. Other mediators take the idea that I want my parties to feel comfortable, sit wherever you want. So it is fairly interesting, and I think, yes, okay. So you need to be comfortable as a mediator. Your participants, your disputants need to be comfortable. Your subject matter needs to be comfortable. So in this next shot, which is one of my favorites, this is one of my colleagues in Toronto. I did a photo shoot for some mediators that wanted headshots, and I photographed this gentleman, and the only thing we had around us was the garage. So I figured let's place him by the garage door. The horizontal lines give direction. You don't tend to look at the left of the image. You look right into this gentleman's eyes. Now, in order for this gentleman to feel comfortable, he kept his cell phone handy. So if you notice in his left hand, he is holding on to his cell phone, which I like because that's very much this particular person. Now, in mediations that I conduct, I don't have cell phones available, but for a photo shoot, it's quite a different thing. But sometimes people need support. Okay, this is an easier one. Make eye contact, but I know it is only when it is culturally appropriate. So I know that Toronto and Canada has a very large multicultural population. You always want to check that first. Can the mediator shake hands with somebody? Can they look a party in the eye? Can the parties look at each other in the eye? Can the parties shake hands? So absolutely, as a mediator, I think it's your responsibility to figure out that piece. Okay. Listen to understand your client's perspective on what's going on. So how do you know? I'm sorry, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. Listen to understand your client's perspective. Make sure your client feels heard and understood by you. A lot of my participants in my classes will ask me, did I do a good job the mediation didn't resolve, and I say, did you provide a safe forum for the parties to speak freely? And they hopefully will say yes. And then do they know that you understand what they're going through, or what their position is? Hopefully the answer to both those questions is yes. Then you have done a good job, because in mediation, it is up to the parties to resolve the conflict. If they don't want to settle, they don't want to settle. So that's how you know you have done a good job. Now, the interesting thing with this adorable little frog, which is only about 2 inches, while it's very cute, I think it's called the blue jean frog or something like that, it is entirely poisonous. So be careful of the blue jean frog that might be a client. Okay, so we'll move on to individuals. This is a very interesting photograph. So this woman was a member of a wedding party, and it is a great example of why active listening skills is so important. Please don't photograph me, is what she kept telling me. I was photographing the wedding she was a party to. She just kept saying, please don't tell me, or please don't photograph me. As a rule, as a photographer, you never take a picture of somebody who doesn't want to be taken, who doesn't want their image taken. So I asked questions, and I learned what was really going on, but she didn't mind being photographed. She didn't want her double chin being photographed. So this now tells me a whole lot more. So, and I listened to what she needed. So listen to why somebody doesn't want to participate. Reframe that shot, and it was very simple. Make sure, in this instance, your person that you're photographing isn't facing directly to the camera. So I had her facing away, and then you have her turn her head, and I'm where her head is turned. So when she's facing away from the camera and her head is turned, her chin that she was so concerned with pretty well disappears. I call it the twist and turn. Having the pew so this was an outdoor wedding. The venue was lovely. It gave stabilization to the subject, and it made it easier for her to relax. Once she knew her chin would not be in the photograph, she was ready to move forward. It is similar to a disputant who is saying, I don't want to be involved in that mediation. I don't want to be in the same room with that other participant. It is up to the mediator, of course, to find out why. I look at it as the position is, I don't want to be next to that person. But there's always an underlying interest, a want, need, fear, desire, or concern that might be preventing them from participating. Maybe they are good if it is simply a shuttle mediation where the mediator is running back and forth between 2 rooms. Anything that a person says, I don't want to do this, is a position. It's up to us to figure out the underlying interest. So go wider to give context. So what is this person bringing to the table? What's their backstory? What's going on? Why are they a stakeholder in this? And what information can they share that will bring them closer to the resolution? Now, in this instance, I put him right in the center of the photograph, mainly because, and it's technically not a great thing to do, but you can break rules once you know the rules. I hate to say it. And I liked the background information that he gave. So he's in this presentation for that. Make sure your photo tells a story. So this man is quite a rock star in the military area in Ontario and certainly Canada. His medals tell a story. And his favorite saying, possibly my favorite saying, is, this presentation is so dangerous, you're going to have to wear a parachute just to listen to it. So, and full disclosure, this is my dad, and he is joining us today. So that's my dad. And there you go. So Dad, there's your shout out today. Okay. Again, for full transparency, I don't practice family mediation, so addressing issues with children is not my specialty. But when photographing children, see the world through their eyes, get down to their level. Literally, I was squatting down, and mom was squatting down, and I think you get a lovely image. Same thing with this one, zone in, get to their level. Okay, pairs and groups. So this is an interesting point of discussion when it comes to power imbalances, and it's also a great photographic tip. So listen to what your parties want during the mediation process. With the couple on the right, we're going to move it to their engagement photographs. It was really important that they have horses present in the background of their photographs. So I found a location where horses were present, and off we all went. Make your parties as comfortable as possible. So as I mentioned, interestingly enough, these images show other elements that are relevant in dispute resolution. So on the left, I took this photograph with a gentleman, and you could see that I drew this line where our noses are. I am definitely in the foreground, the gentleman is in the background. To me, this creates a power imbalance. I am definitely taking the lead here, and I'm taking the lead in this photograph. With the couple on the right, their noses are lined up. So that's a great photographic tip for taking people. Make sure the noses are lined up. So now, hypothetically, if this was a mediation, the couple on the right are coming to the table on an even playing field because I've made it that way as a mediator. The two parties, my friend and I in the background, not so much. That is a definite power imbalance. And whoever is mediating this better make sure that the gentleman takes a step forward and I take a step back, so we can also be attending this process on the same page. So again, making sure your photos tell a story. It was interesting that the groom wanted to be in the foreground. Totally fine. He is the groom. His son is in the background. The car was important. And then in the center, we have the lovely shot of two sisters at this one sister's wedding. Don't forget that even in a mediation process, there are impromptu moments when no one is looking that can actually build relationships that, again, Prachi was talking about earlier. So it can help bring the parties together. And in this instance, the groom and the best man were helping to fix the boutonnieres on the jackets of the groomsmen. It was a very light moment, and as was noted, can be relationship building. So groups and pairs. Now in this, I took none of these photographs. So I will confess, none of them are mine. So, and this might be more photographic than not. So when you're taking groups of people, try and create geometric patterns. It just makes things more pleasing and more structured. So here's an example of taking groups. So you want to look at triangles and diamonds. So the group on the left, you can see several triangles are formed. The group on the right, we have a lovely diamond pattern, and it makes a visually interesting image. Okay, now this is a tricky one. Groups, use what is around you. Again, many of us have had to improvise during mediation. So I know one of the most challenging locations I ever mediated in was in a building that was being evacuated. And it was difficult because we all had to run down a set of stairs. Mediation was still going on, but we managed to get through it. Sometimes you need to see what is available to you, taking in the location, the number of participants, what they need for a successful photo shoot or what they need for a successful mediation, and timing. How much time did I have to take these photographs? So taking important pictures or mediating is not dissimilar. You are thinking all the time, how much time have I got? What's going on here? How are the parties? Where do they want to be? Now, the other thing that comes up in this image are the guns. I had to make an ethical dilemma. Could I photograph this wedding knowing how many guns were in front of me? Now, aside from the ethical dilemma and the fact that I had no choice because I was hired to photograph the wedding, had I known there were guns there, maybe I would not have accepted it. But thankfully, none of the guns were loaded. But, you know, we are presented as mediators with ethical dilemmas in the process. Can we mediate? Is the subject matter so difficult for us that we don't think we can? So in this instance, as soon as, you know, once I heard that the guns were not loaded, I was good to go. But it was a dilemma. I've never mediated with guns before. So now we're looking at groups. So this is an interesting diagnostic. So we have a concept of mediating, and I don't think I can share a screen to draw it, but think of a triangle with substantive issues on one side, process on the other side, and the emotional on the bottom. A mediator is always, as you know, running through that triangle. They call it the triangle of interest. Why are we here? How does this process unfold? And how do I balance the emotional issues that are coming up? This photograph is not dissimilar. It's all about the process, the substantive, and the emotional. So what's the process here of arranging everyone? Keeping in mind each party and their underlying interest when being photographed, plus the need to make everybody look as good as possible. The substantive issues that are going on, well, this is a wedding photograph. We know who the couple are. It's an image of a happy couple and at least 2 divorces. So 4 people that don't want to stand next to each other. And in one or 2 instances, their new spouses. So that's the emotional part. Be kind to the participants. 2 are definitely happy in this photograph, and at least 4 are a little bit stressed. So make sure you balance that out. So it's an interesting analogy. You're looking at the substantive issues, the process of placing everybody, and balancing everybody's emotions. I figure this out well ahead of time before the wedding. Here again, look for the substance, the process, and the emotional. And I have to say, it is all good there. Nothing really to say. So, is everybody familiar with the book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury? It's a good book. It gives you the principles of negotiation. So Roger Fisher, who has he did a film called The Hacker's Star Negotiation, where he coaches somebody in a negotiation. And once he's finished the coaching, he says, okay, now that you've learned everything, forget everything. So move forward, take it out of your mind, try and relax with what's going on. The book is Getting to Yes. And then he has a follow-up book called Getting Past No. And then Harvard kind of took his content and ran with it. They have the program on negotiation at Harvard, and they are constantly offering training and seminars and lectures. And again, take the formal photograph and then have the fun one. Relax a little bit. Now that you know it all, forget it all. Okay, this next photograph is not mine. And it is my personal rant when it comes to photography. So I do relate this to mediation. So the crouch, there are only certain circumstances when you want to do what I call the crouch. So I did not take these photos. The photograph on the left shoved a bunch of people into a group and didn't take into account the following. The bride is in the back. There are at least 4 chairs that I can see that none of the subjects of the image are actually using. The background is distracting, and there are light switches that shouldn't be there. There is someone in the photograph who is not a stakeholder. How I see this image as a mediator, the main stakeholder is barely visible. So the power imbalance is there. The mediator has not arranged the location to best suit the needs of their parties, and everybody looks uncomfortable. The environment may not be suitable. There is someone at this table who simply is not a stakeholder and should not be present. The image on the right, I just say, don't ever do this. If they can all be lined up in such a format, I mean, the formatting is not terrible. Why are they crouching? Have them stand up and then realign next to their height. So, and even the bride is crouching. So it's just my own personal rant about photography, unless you're doing something like this. So these are also not mine, but clearly they're actors or performers and they want to portray a certain image. So I would have no issue at all with that in that context. The next area we're going to look at is lighting. So typically always use a flash. So even your cell phone can override the flash so that it's always on. Daylight might be harsh. Using a flash fills in deep shadows that are created because your subjects are actually in shadow. So, you know, the light can be completely overhead, the rest of the face is in darkness. The best time to take a photograph is either early in the morning or later in the day around sunset, and not necessarily noon, which we tend to gravitate to because, of course, it's the sunniest part of the day, but it can be very, very harsh light. So here's an example, and it is just completely coincidental that I found these 2 photographs. So here's me. Sorry to be so vain, but here's me. And for some reason, I then took that. So totally different photographs once you use a fill-in light. So illuminate your disputant. You can put the spotlight on them for a time. So use a flash unless you want to be creative. So this woman was absolutely, I just thought she was stunning. She had a beautiful profile to be able to photograph that. So no lighting. She is entirely backlit. That's okay. So here's the happy couple. And then again, totally backlit. I find this just great shots. Okay, moving through. And the third thing we're going to look at is cropping. How can you change the image or your story by changing where you place your focus? So here, this is the Vatican. So this is vertical. When you want to show that upward direction, the scene is taller than it is wider. But I'd love to focus in on that beautiful lantern and change the focus of the image. So horizontal, when you want to focus on content and it gives you more, you start getting more detail. You can crop your images. Okay. So with round faces and fuller figures, let the party tell their stories in their own way. Feel free to guide them to draw out the information. So here I used a ladder, and so she's seated, but she's not facing the camera. She's doing that twist and turn, and she's looking up, and I'm about, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet higher than she is. So it reduced everything that she was uncomfortable with. And then I was able to crop and get a lovely picture of her face. So I call it the twist, look up and crop. So fuller figures, bend, twist, and crop. Make sure in this instance, their noses are on the same level. So this is that lovely bride and groom. If you want to reduce weight, I had the bride stand behind the groom, and she's over his shoulder, leaning in, reducing her chin. She was conscious of her tummy. And I also did the same shot with him. Oh dear. Okay, am I okay to continue? We only have a few pages left. Hopefully.
Yes, please continue, Helen.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you for continuing. We are wrapping it up soon, not quite yet. So keep in mind, you've got to make your subjects comfortable, and you've got to make your disputants comfortable. Now, we know conflict is all about perception. What do you see in this photograph? And I'm just wondering, does anybody want to put anything in there in the text box? So feel free. Okay. I remember this as a lovely holiday I took a number of years ago, celebrating somebody's birthday. I love this photograph. The window at the back is hope, it's future, it's a birthday, it's great. However, I showed this at a presentation, and one of my colleagues said to me, I work in a prison, and this looks like one of the jail cells. So now we get the idea that perception is conflict, right? It's how you perceive something that you're seeing. I see, and I'm reminded of a lovely holiday. My colleague sees this as a prison. So we know that everybody looks at conflict differently. So we're back to this. What do you see here in this image? Okay, so what I see, again, it's those raindrops on the windows 15 stories up, and those lights are traffic lights from that major intersection in Toronto. Everybody sees things differently. And what about this? What do you see in this? And feel free if you want to put something in the chat. So what many people say is they see an X-ray of their kneecap or something. But what this actually is a picture of ice cubes in a glass. And so it's a good thing to remember that when people are in conflict, they are not always looking at conflict exactly the same way. It is very different. So other photography pointers. So in your camera, and in your cell phone camera, you probably see this rule of, you see a grid, and it is to help you place your images. So it's called the rule of thirds, and it's dividing the image into thirds with 2 horizontal, 2 vertical lines. And it is guiding you to put your subject matter wherever those lines cross. It makes a visually interesting photograph. And you can see with that, the horizon line is nowhere in the center at all. You can place the horizon wherever you want. But if you're photographing a person, you can put their face in one of the cross sections. It also made me think of the concept of intersectionality. And this is a quote from the National Association of School Psychologists. So I'm going to just read this quote, and you can think about your disputants. Are they experiencing intersectionality? It provides a lens through which we can examine the process, practices, policies, and structure that are at the risk of people experiencing disadvantage or discrimination because of their intersectional identities. And then another quote says, it could include gender, caste, sex, race, ethnicity, class, sexuality, religion, disability, weight, and physical appearance, and it can be empowering or oppressive. So it's important to think of what is impacting your disputants. Are they literally at a crossroads with whatever it is that they're going through? Okay. So Dr. Ravi, thank you. Like a photo reflects the mood of the person. In conflict, the attitude of parties reflects the resolution acceptability. Absolutely. So here's another shot on the rule of thirds. Oh, hold on. A little, oh, wait. So again, this was this ice storm in Canada, in Ontario. I love this shot. we've got numerous things going on in this image. So if that one cherry-like item was addressing intersectionality, it's winter, it's a neighborhood, they're frozen, they're part of a holiday season. There's so many things that this image represents. The intersectionality it's part of a living form. There's a lot going on in that image. Okay, now in mediation, I've had colleagues that say, don't use humor at all. But I couldn't help it. I'm taking a gamble that because of COVID, everybody will see some humor in this, some cool photos of all the places I visited in 2020 because of COVID. And of course, there aren't any because everybody was stuck indoors. All right. So on a different note, Nivaaran ke samanit sarase teen se punch. Kibich koi sanke chinin, which hopefully means please pick a number between 3 and 5. So would anybody like to pick a number between 3 and 5? Maybe we could say 4, and hypothetically, and then what we could talk about maybe during the closing is, or through the Q&A, are 4 key things that you've learned from this presentation. So maybe we'll hold on to that idea and we will move on. So that is wrapping up the presentation. I do have a book coming out in early 2023, and it's called Real Mediation, a Dispute Resolution Journey Through Film. And what this talks about is how can we use film to teach conflict resolution theory? So, okay, Talak, what a wonderful way to remind the role and responsibilities and techniques for a good mediator through photographs. Certainly an out-of-box thinking. Thanks a lot. You are very welcome. So that's coming out. We are on the last 2 pages. Photography and conflict resolution. Thank you so much. I had a great time, and I hope you learned a few tips to enhance your practice and your photography skills. And there you go. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. I have, again, some translation here, and please forgive me. Epaka perse derievad egar epaka koi saval hey to mujese sampark Karen Helen at lightstoneacademy.com. Thank you again. And of course, contact me anytime if you have any questions. And thank you, Nova. Amarjot, thank you. And Rajiv, thank you. Thank you so much. So that ends my formal part of the presentation. I'm going to stop the share. Thank you. All right, there we go.
Thank you so much, Madam Helen Lightstone, for giving us an elaborate and description and for presentation. And I thank you for enlightening us on the topic and making our doubts clear. I request all the participants kindly share your questions in chat box so that we can take one by one and resolve your doubts with our guest will answer.
I'm happy to answer anything. And of course, if there were 4 key takeaway things from this presentation, it can be photography related or mediation related. I'm so glad you liked it. I appreciate all the lovely comments. Any key takeaways? Okay.
Okay, so can I go with a question?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Please.
Helen, you mentioned you were showing a photograph of a lantern and talking about that you wanted to, focus in on the lantern, and you brought in a comparison about where you want to focus. So my question is, when you want to change the focus like you said, you wanted to focus on the lantern and you want to focus in a mediation on a specific issue, but the parties do not want to change the focus. How would you do that smoothly? If you want to just tell me about your take.
Oh, yes. So if they're not interested in going there, as I like to say, if we know for sure it is not relevant or they find it isn't, I'd explore why first. Sometimes you might have to do it privately. Maybe they're fearful of something, or it could very well be that it is not relevant to the dispute. And then you just shift. You just shift. Well-focused talk. Thank you for that comment.
Madam Helen, I have one question. Many times we are facing a situation where the parties are stuck. As Anupama has said, that they don't want to change the focus, or they don't want to discuss points which we want to focus.
Yeah.
And many times this stuck situation, one thing we have to work on to bring them out. The another situation I found that neither they are heading towards a resolution, nor they want to continue. It's such a confusing state. So what you suggest that what we should do?
So was it first?
How we should take up this and go ahead with parties like.
So they do want to continue with the mediation? Is that right?
Yeah, they are participating in mediation, but they are not. Neither they are, or they. I am not clear that that whether they are understanding the situation which they are. That kind, they are participating, they are cooperating, but they are not able to decide either way.
Right. So then I would definitely caucus with the party. I would separate them for sure and figure out what's going on. What is not clear to them? Is it a trust issue? Are they, could it be as simple as that? They don't trust the person that they're with, and they need a little bit more conversation with you privately to figure out what's going on. Is there a power imbalance? Yep. Is there a power imbalance that needs to be addressed that maybe is holding them back from something? But I think at some points, I'd caucus, separate them. Also, it might be at the point in a meeting, it could be too early to talk about that one topic, especially if there are multiple issues going on. Maybe it's just too early. Maybe just, okay, let's just jot this down. Let's write this down and we can come back to it later, because maybe it's just too much at the time. Why don't we focus maybe on this smaller item first? So that, there are smaller elements that maybe they can build up to. But I think caucusing and figuring out what's really preventing them from moving forward. Are they feeling supported? Is it a power imbalance? I'd look at that first. And do they understand?
Sometimes I felt that they are in cycle of revengeful, like they are more revengeful, like they are more concentrating on taking a revenge instead of hoping that what is good for them.
Right. So then you have to question, is this suitable to continue? If that is all that they're saying is, how do I get back at the other person? Maybe they're not suitable. They might also be of the mindset where they need a decision maker. In Canada, there, of course, as I'm sure anywhere, there are some people that just don't get the mediation concept, and they need somebody to make a decision, even if they lose, if we could put it like that. So it could be that person, it's a hard thing to shift them off that revenge piece. You can explore their alternatives. What happens if you don't settle? What are the outcomes for you? So are you familiar with the acronym, the BATNA?
Yeah.
So the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What happens if you don't settle? You have an opportunity to talk, to share, to resolve. And if you like, you can't use it as a threat, of course, but your alternative, is court if this doesn't resolve now. This is your opportunity. Yeah. What are you going to do? So it's a tough one. So maybe could also be that maybe more time was needed with both parties to sort of figure out where they're coming from. It's a tough one. So the BATNA, that best alternative to a negotiated agreement, is in a lot of instances an eye opener for parties because they don't think beyond today. You mean this could end up in court if I don't settle? Yeah, it could. And then what happens? Let's talk about that road. So yeah, so that I know it's a long answer.
Anybody has a question forward and put your questions. Feel free to write your questions.
Absolutely. I'm seeing some great comments on takeaways. Love the comment, well-focused talk. Creativity should be at its peak. This is great because that is the beauty about the mediation process. We have a saying, the parties can agree to whatever they want as long as both parties agree and it's legal. So
one of the participants has put a question. I'm reading his question.
Sure.
He's asking, how would you compare impasse with photography?
Oh boy. Well, I like to think about that one image of the close-up of that plant that was frozen, right? How can we melt that frozen image? What do you need to move forward? What's going on? Sometimes it's just a break. Again, caucusing, finding out what's the underlying interest. They may not want to say, I'm terrified of that other person, I'm scared of them or whatever. But, the impasse is very, very difficult. But I would separate the parties again and figure out what is preventing you. The answer to that is melting the picture. Exactly. So what is preventing you from moving forward? Because really only they know. You have to get it out of them. So again, the caucusing, just in case they're fearful of saying something in front of the other. Oh, the mediator holds the camera and can focus to understand, but, oh, hold on, I lost it for there a second. But is it not correct to show them the picture to change it? Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Why not use images? Definitely. Here's where you are. We're frozen. What can we do? Definitely.
I think
it's a good idea. It's a good idea to ask them what they feel and how they are reviewing the situation. That also sometimes the conversation forward. They also feel like you're respecting them. You're asking for their opinion.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to mention, Helen, there are lovely comments coming in saying the presentation was very well done and it was a wonderful presentation, very interesting.
Thank you.
There's so many of them.
Thank you very much. It's very kind.
Presentation.
Thank you very, very much. And again, happy to answer any more questions. Anybody can email me. Okay, here, Gloria, being in a digital age, show the disputants the picture and let them change the focus. Thank you. Thank you, Gloria. Happy holidays.
I think Sonal mentioned it's really wonderful how you correlate an art form with mediation.
Thank you. It just makes a lot of sense. And right. when you show people, let's say that picture of what's ice cubes, but some people look at it as a kneecap, or the one with the balloons in the hotel, you show that to parties in dispute and they go, what do you mean you're thinking differently than I am? Your perception's different. How does that happen? Well, there you go. There's the beginning of your conflict. So, and I think that's an opportunity for one party to know that the other person isn't thinking exactly the same way. And if they were, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, bringing in how you do the focus on the camera and how you're going to do with it. It's wonderful how you've taken that take.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
well.
you.
So, Prachi, can I take it from here?
Yeah, please conclude. I think we should conclude.
I know it must be very late.
Anupama, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Helen, for a lovely session today, for outlining the similarity between photography and conflict resolution in such detail. And I have to say, when I first heard the topic's title, I thought it was a very interesting take on conflict resolution. Since we've gone past our time, I'd like to be brief in my closing remarks. Just want to mention a few things that I heartily agree with you, Helen, when you drew the similarities between photography and mediation. And I'd like to just highlight some of those things, like when you talked about the angles, the wide angle and a narrow angle, just to understand the bigger issue and then the details when parties come for a mediation. I think in that context, this would be by asking broader questions, general questions, or specific questions, respectively, to understand, what's at the heart of the issue and what concerns they have. And while you were showing different photography and, all your photographs, I think I will always remember one of them, which you showed, which was like a tiny raindrop. That's such a good reminder to say, do not forget to focus on the smaller things.
Yeah.
The smaller things are always part of the bigger things. And as we always say, small things have great value. So similarly in mediation, we must focus on the smaller things as well. They mean a lot to the parties. They may mention it very subtly, but I think a mediator needs to be very mindful of that, needs to focus on everything that is being said by the parties, whether they go on and continue to say the same dialogue 5 times or 10 times, as you said, until they feel they're being heard. But sometimes things which are very, very deep and sometimes things which are of great value, they're not able to voice it. They may sound very small when they first begin to talk about it, but they may have much deeper values. So I think we must focus on the smaller things as well as the bigger things. We need to understand the cultural context, whether it's photography or mediation, as you mentioned. I personally believe that because, as I said, I practice both in New York and in India, and I've done it in other countries too. So the mediator needs to be very mindful of the cultural nuances from where the parties are coming in. If you are mindful of those, this could be very helpful in moving the process forward. And vice versa, if you miss out on those small nuances, they could take the mediation completely backward and it could backfire. I'm sure, Helen, you really agree with that point, right?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
I've seen that work in my own personal experiences. Being mindful of those has helped me so much, in having a good mediation. And as a mediator, we also talked about trying to understand the underlying thoughts of the people involved. I loved your example of the woman who didn't want to be photographed. It wasn't actually about, not wanting to be photographed. It was her concern about how she's going to appear.
Exactly.
And I think very subtle, which she probably wouldn't be able to voice it. And even if she does, it's going to come much later. It's like, peeling of the onion. You'll have to peel the onion layer so many times before you'll be able to get to the point where she'll be able to trust you to tell you that.
Exactly.
So whether it's a photograph, I'm trying to tell you, this is the reason I'm apprehensive about taking my photograph, or telling you a deeper thought, whether it's coming for a mediation, why something is bothering the parties. I think we really need to go deep down to the underlying thoughts as a mediator. Once the mediator, I think, understands the underlying interests of the parties, they would be able to help them immensely.
I agree.
I hope I kind of resonated what you mentioned. And I would just like to put forth two of my points when we're talking about photography and conflict resolution. I think in life, everything is relative, and here perception is very significant. Facts, statements, reality are all as we perceive them. What may seem correct to one person may not be correct for another person. Now, why does that happen? I believe that happens because each person perceives the situation based on their lens, which is influenced by their life experiences, their upbringing, their education, their environment, and a myriad of other variable factors. So that's what happens when parties come in for mediation. They're influenced not just by what's actually happened, but also by their own experiences, their environment, their upbringing, and all the other things that I mentioned before. So I think a mediator needs to be very mindful of those.
I agree as well. Yeah.
Right. And to put it in the context of conflict resolution, I also believe that if we focus more on problems, they become bigger. So like when you're talking about photography and you're changing your focus or you're trying to decide where you want to focus on, I believe it's the same for mediation. I believe if we focus more on the problems, they become bigger. And if we focus our attention towards solutions, there's a greater possibility that we might be able to come up with better solutions. So I think as a mediator, it's our own responsibility also to try and shift the party's attention gradually and gradually. I mean, it won't happen in an instant, but gradually you want to understand them, you have to have a rapport with them. And then once that's there, you want to shift their focus from the problem towards generating a solution. And I think that's where I drew the comparison between photography and conflict resolution. With that, from my side and Team Nivaaran, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for taking out the time to speak with us, to share your knowledge and experiences. It has been an insightful session. I would like to extend a hearty thanks to all of you for joining us this evening, Helen, especially you, because it's an early morning for you on our weekend. And I do applaud you for, trying to speak in Hindi for this webinar. It was
I
awesome.
offer classes if you like.
It was awesome. I have to say that.
Thank
I
you.
would thank each one of you for joining today's program, staying engaged. And I would like to thank Team Nivaaran organizers for having this webinar, for giving me this opportunity to be a part of it. And last but not the least, I would like to thank Rahul and our tech team for making this webinar work seamlessly. I wish you all a great weekend and hope to see you all in the future webinars.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Helen.
Thank you.
Helen. Thank you,
Thank
Helen.
you so much.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.